Do you want to call up? Okay, Councilmember Onishi.
Yes, maybe at this time, can I ask Dr. Gonzalez to come up?
We're going to get the Dr. Burst to the scientists we already.
Yeah, we already.
Well, we have our turns too, right? Can't we call up our,
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Gonzalez, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
I am Dennis Gonsalves. I'm a retired researcher. I was director of the USDA Pacific Basin Agriculture Research for 10 years, and prior to that I was at Cornell University and University of Florida. My specialty is in plant viruses, and I worked on the team that developed the genetically engineered papaya, and also was on the team that actually went through all of the deregulation efforts for the papaya in the U.S. and in China, in Japan.
Thank you. Okay, you've heard a lot of comments there, or about experts mentioning about the papaya and about I guess I think you'd be one of the experts to really explain the history of what happened from when the virus came in into what happened when you folks did your research and what is it today. We've heard where you folks didn't not do enough studies on the health part, and maybe you can add that in when you
and I'd just like to ask that we ask the things that we didn't ask before. On the last, because part of the reason why we're continuing is we wanted to bring up other experts. So if we want to ask, can we ask things that we've not asked them before?
Well, I'm just getting, because we just heard from one side about how the papaya was. So now I want to have on the research side what Dr. Gonzalez did.
Point of order.
Yes, go ahead with your point of order.
Point of order. With all due respect, Mr. Onishi, we've heard from Dr. Gonzalez more than one time, and we have several experts in here we've never heard from at all.
I understand.
That's the reason. We already heard the history, we heard about his team, and we need to move on and get some of the other people.
I understand that. But then what I heard today was that about there wasn't enough health studies. So I wanted Mr. Gonzalez to explain what they did on their side.
Okay, but you were asking about the history of the papaya.
Disregard that part. Okay, so basically it was, there wasn't enough health studies, and what we heard was that, what was put into the papaya, the genes that was put in for the resistance of the ring spot, but then there was also, I guess, a couple other genes that was put in, but it didn't affect the vitamins and the nutrition inside of the papaya, right? So maybe you can just go on those two subjects for now.
Well, what we did to make the papaya resistant is we put in the gene of the coat protein of the papaya ring spot virus. So we put in a small part of the gene, and this coat protein is present on a virus that infects any papaya. So if you have a non-GMO papaya infected by the papaya ring spot virus, it'll have the coat protein in it. So, but it was this coat protein gene that we put into the papaya that makes the papaya resistant to the papaya ring spot virus.
What health studies?
I think that was the question about health studies.
And then what about the health studies?
Okay, then to go to the deregulation, we applied first in the United States. We had to go to USDA, EPA, and FDA. Now with USDA, they were concerned with the environmental impact of this genetically engineered papaya. So we addressed the questions as to whether the papaya would be a super weed, if it becomes resistant, would it be in danger of having viral recombinants that could affect the environment. So we did all of that kind of work on that thing. Now, with the EPA, EPA regarded our coat protein as a pesticide because it was killing the virus. So we had to apply to EPA for tolerance clearance of the amount of cold protein that was in. So we applied for an exemption from tolerance, and our application essentially said that with the plants that are naturally infected with the papaya ring spot virus for many years and that are infected, they have 8 times more cold protein in the naturally infected papaya, whereas in the cold protein from our genetically engineered papaya, it had less. So we argued that we did not have to have tolerance levels of the cold protein because we were much less than the naturally infected papaya. So on that aspect, we they gave us clearance of the tolerance. Then for the food safety, what we did is we compared the nutritional aspects of the transgenic and a non-transgenic papaya to see if there was differences, and then that package was submitted. One especially important thing that we wanted to check was in natural papaya, there's isothiobenzol cyanate, which is a poison in natural papaya. So we wanted to make sure that in our transformation process that we did not elevate the amount of this toxin or this compound that is poisonous. So we were especially careful in measuring, in comparing the amount of this compound, and we found that the levels were the same, and the levels of this toxic compound is very, very low in normal papaya. I mean, it's primarily present in a green papaya. So I don't see that this compound is have any danger to the natural papaya. But we wanted to see if this transformation activity might have elevated that, because we definitely did not want elevated amounts of this compound, and so we compared, and we found that it was the same.
And so how long did your testing take?
In the U.S. Application, well, we had to collect. It took us, I would say, about a year and a half of getting the data for the nutritional comparisons, doing the work to look at the different compounds that might affect the health of the papaya, like the toxin that I just described. So it took about I would say about a year and a half for us to do these studies, and then we submitted the package to FDA.
Okay. And the last thing that I wanted to ask is that if you know of any or if you do have any information about what you've heard where, I guess the big seed companies and the government, I guess, kind of strong the foreign country like Japan to, I guess, purchase it.
No, we did not strong arm. And I should mention that it was the Hawaii Papaya Industry Association that sent the petition, that sponsored the petition to Japan, for example, and even for the USDA and EPA. And and we did experimental work, fill out applications, and I can tell you, I mean, I did it. We had no pressure we exerted no pressure on the people for them to do what we wanted them to do. We simply got the data, sent it to them.
And didn't Japan do their own research?
Well, with Japan, after we got it deregulated in the U.S., then the industry wanted it deregulated in Japan. And in Japan, again, it was a different process. Well, they had their own process. So they asked various series of questions. They were especially interested in allergenicity, toxicity and potential of these things happening. So we would look at what they ask. In some cases where we need more experiments, we did the experiments, and then we submit the package. Then they analyze the package, then they come back to us and say, well, this part is okay, this other part is not all right, and so forth. And they say, well, if you want to continue, you have to answer these questions. So then we would do more experiments and then go forward in that manner.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for him.
Councilmember Willie?
Let me just ask you, it's my understanding that you do own certain GMO patents yourself? Okay.
Yeah.
And that those are papaya ones, or are they other crops?
No, they are the papaya ones. When I was at Cornell, I led the team to clone the cold protein gene.
Okay, that's all I need.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that clear. And that when you were talking about testing, it was my understanding that the federal agencies did not require human and animal studies testing, so we have not had those tests. The tests that you were discussing were not neither animal nor human studies, correct?
Yes, for the papaya in the U.S. as well as the Japanese application, they never required any human or animal testing.
Right, and that's one of my big problems with the federal is treating those as substantially equivalent and therefore exempting these edible products. If we go, and in terms of cross-pollinating, there was some discussion, or what I understand is that between some of the farmers that started doing GMO, started trying to improve the crop by breeding them with non-GMO papayas to maybe just as any farmer working on the better and improving them, and that it was basically the lawyers or the patent liability came in and said no, that you cannot be basically improving your crop in that way. If you're going to do our GMO, you do it with our GMO seeds and that's it. I don't recall any of those activities happening. But if they wanted to improve their crops, and utilize the GMO seeds, they could. Like, for example, they created, for Oahu, they created the Laia Gold, which essentially is a hybrid between the Camilla non-transgenic papaya and the rainbow papaya. I think what I'm trying to get at is one of the big problems I see is the whole patent law and patent liability law and the controls and how that affects it, and how that basically those crops, you become a patent licensee when you sign up, or at least in the seed companies. You press that button, I agree, it means you agree to everything in that booklet of all of the ways that you are controlled by that, the owner of the patent.
But that's nowhere like the papaya.
And I separate out. I mean, one of my problems is this focus on the papayas. We've tried to set aside, in my bill, if it passes the way it is right now, is set aside the papaya industry and basically grandfather in what's here. Papayas in. I mean, as my understanding is more than 50% of the papayas, feral papayas, are GMO. So it's sort of like, you got to surrender. We surrendered, but we don't want that to happen in anything else. One other question is just with regard to inserting the gene. I think it was Dr. Gonsalves spoke somewhat, is that it's not just the impact of what is the gene, it's not just the impact of what is the pesticides, it's also all these different markers and promoters and the unknowns. So I just want you to, I understand that the university promoted this methodology with the papaya and it's here. So I think I'd like to see, how can we maybe transition and do some more organic? How can we do that and help, work with the industry? Anyway, I have no further questions.
Yeah, I think it's no problem to work with organic and transgenic, and that's why we did our genetic gene flow study, so that you can do it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. In
Walter ready here?
in Kona we have.
Chair?
No, we had.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I haven't got a chance to call up anyone. Is it okay if I call someone up? I haven't.
Yeah, I want to deal with two people from Kona yet because they've waited all morning and we invited them to come. Unless this person was somebody you invited that was here.
Well, the person I did invite ended up on, I don't know where she is. So now.
Okay, so let me work on the Kona and then I'll call you and you can ask for an.
Okay.
And let's remember that what we're working on is what we talked about at the last meeting was making sure that we asked the questions that we needed to know the answers to or needed more information of, not to ask or repeat the same thing again. Yeah? Okay, so I'm going to ask, in Kona, do we have